and I'm going to start off. So uh, we have a very short video, and then we're going to hear from Patricia and Angela, have a discussion, and then talk about some next steps after that. So that's our overall agenda for tonight or this afternoon, depending on where you are, I guess. So if that's good, we're going to get going now. And now I can show my ineptitude for sharing as well, because it takes a while to get things going. Got that one done. And here we go.
How do I talk about climate change to my brother-in-law, my neighbor, my colleague, my coworker? I hear this question almost every single day. And usually people have given it a try and it hasn't gone so well. It's either ended in an argument or it's been so depressing you just want to go back to bed and pull the covers back over your head. Here's the thing. Climate change is scary. And it absolutely is depressing. I'm a climate scientist, so I know. But to care about climate change, we don't have to be a certain type of person. I'm absolutely convinced that just about every single person has every reason they need to care about climate change already. And their reason might be different than yours or mine. But if we don't think we care about climate change, it's not because we have to change who we are or what we care about. It's simply because we have not connected the dots between what we already care about and how climate change is affecting it. So when we have these conversations starting over something that we share, whether it's a love of cooking or a sport or the place where we live or our child, we connect the dots between climate change and how it's affecting what we already care about, what already matters to us. And then we talk about how we really can fix this thing. And in fact, climate change is not a giant boulder sitting at the bottom of a very steep hill with only a few hands on it. That giant boulder is already at the top of the hill. It's already going down the hill in the right direction. It already has millions of hands on it. It just needs more hands to get it going faster. When we realize that we are not alone, when we realize that the world truly can change, that's when we realize that yes, we truly can make a difference. And how do we knock over that first domino? By having a simple conversation about why climate change matters and what we can all do to help.
So with that, I'm going to move into the speakers section of our program for tonight. And I'd like to introduce Patricia Lane. Welcome, Patricia. Patricia is a retired lawyer and experienced mediator. She brings negotiation skills to the hardest conversations. She writes a weekly column for Canada's National Observer, profiling young people and elders shaping a better future. She co-founded Lead Now and GVAT.ca, and she's taught hundreds of people, ages 12 to 92, to see talking about climate as an act of love. So, Patricia, would you like to speak to us, please?
Thank you so much, Dave. So I'm really pleased to be here. We are a small but mighty group, as is often the case. And so what I would like to do is just talk for a few minutes about some of the work I've done leading, facilitating, instigating, participating in climate conversations. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about how I've shifted my perspective in the last few years and how that's made it so much easier and better. So I want to just begin in 2008 when I saw Al Gore's movie An Inconvenient Truth. We've all seen it, I assume. And so that gave me a sense of urgency and I thought, well, I got to do something because I have a very well-developed sense of agency. I believe that I can make a difference. I was raised that way. And if I can, then I have a responsibility. And I also believe in science. And I'm married to a scientist, and we have had a very good education in that way. And so I kind of walked into the next part of my work in climate, assuming that everybody else felt the same way, that they had this sense of agency and that they believed in science, but maybe didn't have the sense of urgency. So I set out to help them see that things were urgent and to understand the science. Um, and so I did a lot. In we began with a series of house parties over the course of about 6 months. I used my networks and they used their networks to pull people into our home. We had dessert and tea many weekday evenings, and people who knew each other and the people they knew came together and talked about. Uh, we showed a PowerPoint that my son, who was then 12, had developed from an Inconvenient Truth material, and people talked about it and ate dessert. And they did some things. Some of them got off oil, some got heat pumps, some ate less meat, some decided to fly less. They were lovely events. They were very social, and there was a lot of trusted networking going on there. I also worked with a major environmental group, one of the largest in the country, and persuaded them to mandate their staff to do all their work through a climate lens. And that had some impact too. Um, and then I got involved in helping to start Lead Now in 2010. It was started with the express purpose of getting rid of a climate denying federal government. And in 2011, when the first election came along, we didn't, of course, have much success, but we did sponsor and encourage the emergence of what we called youth flash mobs. And maybe some of you saw some of them. They're covered in the news a bit. And they were really fun and really successful. They got quite a bit of media. And in dissecting the election afterwards, we realized that in the places where they had the flash mobs, there the electoral needle did move quite significantly. So we thought that was interesting, but didn't really know what to do about it. Then the founding of Greater Victoria Acting Together came along, and I've been in leadership of that for that group since its founding, and it represents about 60,000 people in my small city. It's an important organization. Its leadership team, kind of moves somewhere between 50 and 150, depending on the time. But climate has been an important part of its work ever since its beginning because I insisted on it and helped to bring in staff and make point decision making in that direction. And we've made some changes. We've got some important transit improvements. Some climate forward politicians have been elected and feel more able to put forward their positions as a result of the community support they know that we will bring. I started teaching, and so I've taught for the University of Victoria, for the Elder College, for a lot of university professors will bring me in to talk to their students, sometimes about climate grief. And I've talked to lots of community groups and lots of environmental staff and some government staff and elected officials. I've done lots and lots of teaching. And it's hard to quantify, but I figure I've reached well over 1,000 people that way. And I've organized my street so that we are free to talk about climate. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And I also publish these columns, and they are not behind a paywall, so anybody can go read them. And they're an invitation to have a conversation effectively with a young person, sometimes an elder, who's working on climate change in a solution-focused way. So I was doing all this work, and I was still looking at the data, which was pretty depressing. And the data says the following. Now, this is where I'm going to share. You can see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so there's a lot of data. Louise Como, who you all know really well, has been instrumental in bringing this data to the forefront, but it's been there for a long time. I can be really confident based on the data that most people I'm talking to, more likelihood with women than with men, much more likelihood with young people than with older people, but still the vast majority of people are worried about climate and want decision makers to do more. So I know that there's a very good chance. It's not a very big gamble that the person that I'm talking to will fall into that. I also know from the data that everybody I talk to is very likely to think that they care more about climate than other people do. It's very clear from the data. And 50% of people don't understand that fossil fuels are the core cause of global warming. And that data is consistent over the last almost 10 years. And because I'm a mediator and have made my living resolving conflicts, I know that people always feel alone when they're in conflict. And so we don't start it voluntarily. We don't walk into difficult conversations and just, okay, now I'm going to be a nuisance because we don't want to feel alone. We're social beings. So we also know from the data that most people feel that they don't have much agency. There's not much they can do about climate change. And most people want their lives to have meaning of some sort. So I have developed an analysis that the fruitful ground for climate conversation is right in the middle of all three of those understandings, evidence-based understandings. So how do I translate that? Well, now when I approach climate conversation, I remembered as I started thinking about this that when I was on the bus to attend a Fridays for Future demonstration, I remember thinking, what is my role in this protest? Remember, I have this developed sense of agency. And I thought, these kids don't need me to talk to them about science. They need me to demonstrate that I care. And I'm going because I want to feel cared about. It's important to me that they care about my future and the future of the people that I love. That was a really interesting moment for me. I didn't do much with it at the time, but I reflected that I'd had that realization. Thank you. Thanks for that. So hopefully that wasn't too distracting. Everybody got my story about being on the bus. Okay, so recently in the last few years, I switched faith communities, and the one that I chose set as its shared mission to be fierce agents of hope. But I didn't hear them talking about climate. And so I asked, well, what does this mean in the context of the climate crisis? And I was a bit jittery about doing that. Like, am I just going to be a pest here? I was kind of interested in fitting in. But the response I got was in line with the data. We don't know. Let's find out. So there were a series of things that happened in the congregation. One of them was that people were invited to give testimonials about how they themselves see themselves as fierce agents of hope in the climate crisis. There was a service devoted to the issue of hope in the climate crisis. Somebody completely without me organized a slow fashion show to give us an opportunity to learn about the fashion industry's polluting impact while we showed off our hand-knit heirlooms. The church introduced heat pumps because it saves them a lot of money and because they're conscious about climate. And we're in line now waiting to have our parking lot turned into a solar roofed installation. And the most important thing, though, is that every Sunday, more than 100 people talk about climate. But we don't do it because we are interested in educating each other about the science. We do it because we are caring for each other. Bonnie Henry, who was our public health officer during the pandemic, spent a lot of time with faith communities during the pandemic, and she was asked why, because it's kind of odd. We're a very small minority. And she said, because they are the communities, the organizations in our culture that come together for the sole purpose of love. And I can see that happening in my community. I'm not talking to people about emissions or CO2 or even the impact, the climate impact that the Iran war is having. I'm not educating people. I'm finding out how they're doing. Has their basement flooded in the last torrential downpour? Are they going to be okay if it gets really hot? What are their plans for the summer, and how are they dealing with the certainty that we will have wildfire smoke, which will get in the way of family reunions? So we don't do it to educate each other. We do it because we want to feel less alone. And the same ethic has been taken into organizing my street. After Trump was elected the second time, I just invited people to come in. We'd already met each other. We'd had a barbecue at the end of the street just to worry together. And as we worried together, somebody said, it might be a good idea if we also talked about like how are we preparing for the next flood, because we were expecting an atmospheric river, because we had 3 basements flood already this week or this year, and we didn't know that. Like our basement flooded, but we didn't know anybody else's did. And so people talked about who has a generator and which companies are they using and how to help each other if that's needed. And then we found out that there'd been a fire in the Pocket Park right around the corner from us, and 2 neighbors had put it out using their long hoses. And we all got permission as a result of that conversation to go into each other's front yards and plug in our hoses to taps to put out a fire if something happens while one of us is away. Well, that's a very small thing, but it's a big difference in terms of how we view our private property. And so, but on the WhatsApp channel last week, the conversation wasn't about climate change. It was about, does anybody know how to do French braiding? Because my kid needs it for her volleyball tournament. So it's an ethic of care. It's not an ethic of education. But things are changing, and there is action as a result. And so I bring this now completely fearlessly into my conversations with strangers because I know that they're very likely to be worried, that they feel alone. And so I'm interested in caring for them. And so that's how I approach my conversations with young people, which are wild, very well. Young people keep coming to talk to me. They say they have a really good experience. There's over 250 of them interviewed now. And I think that's because I'm not doing it with a view to educating them. They educate me sometimes about what they're doing, but it's because I'm offering an opportunity for them to care for me with their actions and for me to care for them. And then I started reflecting back to those house parties and the flash mobs and the community coalition. And I realized that almost all of the good work that has happened, that I've been a part of, has happened not because I've been educating, but because it's been about an ethic of care. And so I've learned that if I can help others protect what they love, I too can feel safer. And so that's the kind of reason that I do this work. I hope that's been helpful.
Yes, it has, Patricia, and there's several things that you're making me think of. Like, I can remember those flash mobs. I'm thinking, yeah, that'd be really cool to bring up again because one of the things that I discovered when I was doing another project, I went through all the Fridays for Future locations across Canada and was looking at all the photos that they posted. And one of the things that I found absolutely astounding was how many of them had people with smiles in them.
Mhm.
They were having a good time doing this. And I think it brings in a sense of community as well as everything else, as you say, caring for each other. So thank you very much. Uh, I'm just trying to move along here. And now I would like to introduce Angela Keller Herzog. So Angela believes in local action and taking responsibility and getting things done to create the world we want to live in. Amen. Human rights and taking climate action are 2 of Angela's priorities. She's received multiple awards recognizing her progressive community leadership, Angela is active in community as an environmental and social justice advocate, board member, and active citizen observer of municipal affairs. Angela has an MA in economics from Carleton University and leads Horizon Green, an economic consultancy organization that focuses on environmental and economic sustainability. She has over 20 years experience working in international development, including at Transparency International and the Canadian federal government. She's represented Canada overseas at the United Nations conferences, and Angela is the Executive Director of Community Action for Environmental Sustainabilities, or CAFES, an Ottawa-based local environmental organization and municipal climate watchdog. So, Angela, welcome, and please share with us.
Hi, Dave. So I apologize. I think that that bio needs to be like shortened and updated. So I haven't been finding that much time for the on the consultancy side, and I have been basically sort of 120% on cafes, which is our here in the city of Ottawa, our local environment and climate network. Um, my invitation to this nice meeting was to talk about cracking the silence and how to talk about climate, right? So I'm gonna start with a couple of things about how not to talk about climate. So a few years ago, maybe about, I think it was about, let's see, we're in 2026, maybe about 10 years ago. Um, it was New Year's, and we have these great friends in Montreal. So we're kind of cross godparents. So we have two kids, they have two kids, and we cross godparent. So 10 years ago, our kids would still come with us, and they had this New Year's party, which was a big tradition. So I had like a few, like maybe a few plus another few drinks too many. And so I got really passionate about how climate is the most important thing and nothing else matters because we're all going to fry otherwise and millions will be displaced and migration and all that. So then another guy who was a human rights advocate starts saying like, no, you got it all wrong. Like human rights is the most important thing and we need to start there. And if we start importing solar panels from human rights abusing situation, then we've lost the plot. We might as well not bother. And we started getting into this fight. And my daughter was just like, Mom, that was so bad. Like, this is so not on. Um, and the lesson there is that like we're all passionate about things, but we definitely in talking about climate not to get into a situation of this issue is more important than your issue, right? Because everything is connected. So that was a real lesson. And like obviously once I was like fully sober and reflected on it, this became a very good lesson to not fall into that trap. And I think now I could like drink quite a few drinks and not fall in the trap. So lesson learned, I think. But then you start getting into this, everything is all connected. Like, oh my God, oh wow, this problem, that problem, so overwhelming, right? Which is what I call it's sort of like the big enchilada problem. You know, when you have a burrito and you stick too many things into it and it's overflowing and it's this big and you can't really eat it anymore. It's kind of like that. So when you're trying to motivate people, when you're trying to give talks, you have this big enchilada problem. So that doesn't really work. So how do we deal with that? And I'm really grateful to you, Dave, that you played that clip from Katharine Hayhoe. She very recently was the AGM annual general meeting guest for cafes and gave this wonderful, wonderful talk and then took all these questions. She is amazing. And she really so clearly explained that the majority of people are worried about the big enchilada and they're worried about climate. So there's no real need to start the conversation, the silence by trying to explain to people how bad things are. Like they're already worried, right? So what we need to do is find ways to talk about climate that are relatable and that are also already on solution and action territory, right? So that's where we need to find the entry point. So how do we do that? So I think the kind of fourth communication point is curiosity, right? So when we're in a one-on-one conversation or a small group or sometimes even a bigger group, right? Expressing curiosity about, okay, like where are you guys at? So, like, what do you do? Where do you live? Like, how, whatever. You are curious about the other, and they, I think, tend to respond positively because you're taking an interest in them. You're giving them status. You're engaging. And out of that curiosity and that conversation, it is then very easy to find your climate entry point for the climate conversation. Um, and I guess because of how my mental health works, which you got in part in your introduction, Dave, um, I really think that action is the antidote to despair. So when people are overwhelmed, what they need to find is actions. And that will get them out of that. And like here's another story. There was, I think a couple of years ago, we have a SCAN group here in Ottawa, the Seniors for Climate Action Now, exclamation mark. And it's a great group of people. So they organized this whole event in this big hall, and I was one of the speakers. And then Letitia phoned me and said, like, hey, Angela, like, I really hope that you can talk about some actions because, like, it's all kind of like fuzzy and boring, and people really don't know what to do. So we need action. So I said, oh, well, like, that sounds like right up my alley because I'm always saying how action is the antidote to despair. So I should be able to like trot out a whole bunch of actions, right? Anyway, so I sat down with myself preparing for this talk and I said, okay, we're going to put some 10 actions on the website and to answer that need when people want to know what to do, right? There should be like here's like a recipe book. Here's some actions for you to do. So we do have still, and I think it was updated slightly. Now, is the chat working? Yes, I think the chat is working. Okay, so this is the cafe's 10 actions that came out of that conversation with Letitia. Um, and basically, there are simple things that I think in any municipality, like you can pick from that menu in terms of like actions that are like within one's reach. So if we have that menu, and I'm going to try to do the screen share maneuver. So no, screen 3, share, and I want this PowerPoint to come up. So these are like the balloons. So these balloons correspond to the 10 things on that web page. I think that what we do is we express curiosity, we find out about the other, the person, the group, the audience that we're talking to, and then we pick one of our balloons about ready action, and then we start connecting those. And I think that way we can weave a conversation that is talking about this like satisfying action. Oh, here's something we could do. And it has to relate in the conversation. That was Catherine Hayhoe's thing, right? So it doesn't make sense to sort of have these as the prescriptions that like everybody should do. But as we're trying to have the climate conversation, I think that we do need to have sort of action items in our back pocket. that we can then have an optimistic and like, here's something we can do. And obviously, the interests of different people are different, right? So, doing like your sustainable finance bit and divesting your stocks and bonds and retirement savings from fossil fuels, like some people would be like right into that, right? Other people, maybe you can talk to them about joining their community association and building up like a peer conversation there. Other people, you can talk to them about home improvements, energy retrofits. Um, One really cool thing, taking it closer again to family, um, stop share there. That's more comfortable. Um, this whole advice about shifting from like too much stuff to experiences. Um, so one of my special tricks is when my family members, especially my kids, ask me, Mom, what do you want for Christmas? What do you want for your birthday? What I say is, I want a coupon. I want you to give me a coupon that is for one nature walk together for 45 minutes. Or I want a coupon saying you'll come with me to a political action where we go to some protest and like yell and hold up signs for something that is good to support and get some fresh air. So that is another way to have climate engagement from members of your family that are maybe not always like, yay, yay, climate, because that's kind of what mom does, but to kind of make that connection. So that's my little coupon trick. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Angela. And lots of different ideas. And I think that one of the things I found is particularly talking to men. They want to talk about technology, they want to talk about this. So, we started talking about heat pumps, or an example I just gave recently was I was out for a walk and I saw a single person electric vehicle. And I was like,
Hmm.
wow, that is so cool. And I didn't know that they existed. So I came home and I Googled it. And sure enough, there are 20 different models of these single person or two people electric vehicles. And they start at about $19,000 US. So for people, who a full size electric vehicle is out of their price range, you can get something where, if it's just you out on your own and you're able to tootle about, go to the store, pick up some groceries, do this, and you're not chewing up fossil fuels when you do it. Why wouldn't you? Like it from a price point. And so again, talking to men about technology is something that seems to draw them in, or talking about how much money they're going to save with an electric vehicle. The other example I've given recently was my nephew who travels for business. He was spending $900 a month on gas, and he switched to an electric vehicle, and he is now able to save uh, well, the amount of money that he's able to save now as a result of using electricity instead of gas, he can make a car payment every month. It's just amazing. And so, these stories, when you get out, people are, ooh, yeah, I like that idea. Or the heat pump, the same thing. Like just you have one machine that does both heating and cooling. And I don't know that it actually saves money in the long run, but technology wise, that's interesting. And I'm just going to give one more example. So I have a friend who's part of a lake stewardship program, and he got into this because he is a keen fisherman. And one of the things that he's learned as a result of being in this is that the fish are changing.
Yeah.
So because the water is getting warmer, uh, fish that like cooler water are beginning to move north, and other fish are beginning to come in. And so, like, that's a topic of the discussion that you can get on with men again. Yeah, it's true. So, I don't know where I start off with this, Angela, but you sparked me. So
Yeah, it's like we have to make the connection, like, right? What are you interested in? And then we can take it from there,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think that like having the conversation and like doing the personal stories, like I'm pretty sure if I told my husband about like, oh man, I was in this webinar and this Dave guy started talking about single vehicle electric vehicles, like single person EVs, and like I mean my husband would be kind of so like you're gonna leave me behind and just like motor on in your little single vehicle, and then we could have a conversation about EVs,
there's
right?
there's two-person models available too.
Right. But just like the point being is like we need to connect to the personally relevant. And we don't need to start with a mission to convince people that there is a climate problem
Yeah,
or indeed like a just global governance problem and or like a capitalism problem. Like most people are aware. And actually just one last thing. It's kind of obvious, I think, in this webinar that everybody is very concerned about climate. But we definitely hit points where we do kind of go towards that despair moment again. Like, is this all useless? Is all the work I've been doing having very little impact? Da 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 da, right? And I think that that's again when we need to connect to the action that fits us and that brings us some kind of joy, right? And Patricia has connected it to caring. When we care about our community, that feels good, right? That's a good way forward. So that's another way of like connecting. So anyway, so I yeah, I'm a proponent of action.
I agree. So this is the point of the program where we open it up for discussion. So does anybody have any questions or any comments they would like to make? Go ahead, Laurie.
Hi, thank you so much, you guys. That was so good. I mean, just giving us the other side of communicating. I posted in the chat a question, and my question is next week for Earth Day, I've been invited to a beach park event for the secondary school. I've got 10 minutes to speak to the young people sitting on the grass. Hopefully, the weather's good. 300 of them. And I've only got 10 minutes and I have no props because there's so many of them. And I'm wondering how to inspire them to take some kind of action without being dismal and depressing. And I'm kind of concerned about it, although I'm an educator. This is not something I've done. And so I'm looking for a little bit of advice about how to reach a group of young people who may not be all that interested, and I have to keep their attention.
Patricia, Angela?
Okay, can I try a plan? Brainstorm mode? Okay. So I do a lot of like municipal level work, right? So the municipal councilors are kind of like within reach. A lot of the kids don't really know that much about municipal politics, right? So you could start off by saying like, yo, kids, does anybody know we have a municipal level of government? And then you get them to say like, yes, no, whatever, and get some engagement, right? Where they it's kind of all 300 of them like voice back to you. And then you say, okay, so one of my big concerns is climate and climate change. Have you guys heard of that? Yes, probably they have. And then you say, hey, how would you talk to your municipal councilors about climate change? And big silence, right? Like, well, no clue. And then you could talk about what about the power of a question? Did you know that sometimes when you ask a question, it can have very powerful onwards effect? So if you write a letter to your counselor from little Justin, little Susie, asking the counselor a question about climate, like what climate action is the city doing in terms of transportation or something like that. Um, the counselor would then have to answer and think about it. So, audience, 300 kids, who would have a question that we could ask the counselor? And then you get like five, six of them to stand up and give their question, and then their peers will look sideways and take note of what Susan and Justin and those guys are saying. And then you basically say, yay, that was really cool, super cool questions. Ask your counselors these questions. Boom, done. That
Patricia,
was spontaneous.
thanks, Angela. Patricia, do you have anything to add?
I like that a lot. I answered it in the chat, but maybe only to Laurie. So I said, if you haven't seen Luke Wallace's work with schools on YouTube, go look him up right now. He's amazing. Um, so he's a songwriter and he gets these kids singing these climate songs, but they're just having fun singing. Then I suggested that you use a metaphor that will work for everybody. So the one I suggested, like after thinking about it for 2 seconds, is Okanagan. So spring has already sprung, but there's lots of growth that you can't see yet. So underneath the ground, how many of you are aware that there's growth happening right under your feet, like seeds are there or grasses or wherever you are? You'll figure that out. So that's the same as with working to protect our climate. And
Certainly, we have a water issue. We have
okay,
had
working to
so,
protect our water, right?
yeah.
So there are 100 roundtables around the province of people working to protect water, which are supported by the government. Hardly anybody knows about them, but they're there. And there'll be one in your neighborhood too. Um, and so, um, so that would be an example. There are people working in this community who want to protect your water system. How about if you ask your local councillor what they're doing about that for this summer? Like, I think you could marry the two ideas. But I also think you could safely ask questions like, how many of you own a bicycle? And they'll all, lots of them will, and you'll say, so you're already working on climate. That's a really great thing. Or how many of you love this park or love to go swimming in the summer? Well, naming what you love is the first step in. So well done. You're just so far ahead already, right? So, and asking them to go talk to their parents about what they're doing to protect their right to swim in the lake for the next 10 summers, right? So, anyway, I haven't thought about it for very long, but it's basically riffing off Angela's. Get them talking to each other rather than you talking to them.
Yeah.
Get them talking to each other. In a group of 300 on Earth Day, there will be, it's grade 7, 8, and 9. So it's really quite young. It's not high school. But there will be one or two or three people who are climate activists already and who feel quite alone but are brave. And you might even get them standing up, and then they can get some public recognition. And that from an adult, the young people I talk to every single week, practically, when I say, what would you like to say to older people? They all say, we want you to show up. We want your support. We want you, when you come to our meetings, it makes us feel validated. When you
So I
show up
guess one,
on our Zoom calls, we feel dignified. Thank you for doing that. They really want us to show up. So that's what you're doing. You're showing up for them. You're validating them.
Sorry, I just want to keep track of time here, and we only have about 10 minutes left. So I'd like to move on to Avril. She's been waiting for quite some time. Avril.
No worries, Dave. No worries whatsoever. Hello, everybody. I'm going to just share a funny story here. because the climate conversation can happen to you when you don't expect it as well. This morning, I'm part of a Spanish conversation group at our local senior center. Our place here in Penticton is reasonably small. I had published in the newspaper had published a letter to the editor in the newspaper the day before about the upcoming transition conference, transitioning away from fossil fuels. Well, one of the persons, and I should add that I'm in this conversation with all men. There's all men, and then there's me. So when you say they like to talk about the technical stuff, they really do, Dave. But the issue became then, oh, well, you noticed, now we're all speaking in Spanish, of course. Well, maybe I say of course, but it's bad. It's, so we're stumbling. And now I'm having to figure out, what's fossil fuels in Spanish. And I need to talk about batteries and all this sort of stuff. And they're throwing all these technical issues at me and I'm having to respond in Spanish. So I want to sort of let you know that the climate conversation, I guess, in the point of this story is that it can happen when you least expect it. And you may even be required to talk about it in a language that you're not all that comfortable with. So there we are. And that's the wonderful thing about it, is it can just bubble up everywhere. And you run with it, and it can be challenging, but also really inspiring.
Thanks for that wonderful story, Avril. Sean, please go ahead.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the session today. It was very interesting. I hadn't been part of this organization before, so it was first time for me to listen to it. I had the opportunity to meet Catherine Hayhoe last summer in Calgary when she was at the Rotary International Convention, and got a chance to hear her twice, once on a big stage and once on a little stage close up. I've followed her Substack, and I encourage you all to, because learning how to talk about climate is an important thing. I'm still struggling with overcoming the defensiveness and getting angry about what people do or don't do. So that's a good thing. But wanted to comment on Lori, your 300 grade 7, 8, and 9 students. One of the suggestions I would throw out there is after you do your introduction, give them an opportunity to break up into some groups and say, identify a project that you would like to talk about, or what environmental project would you think would be important that is important to you and you'd like to try to carry forward. Let them work a project, or let them work out to do a project and then support that project.
Thank you, Sean. Sue, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I live in a very small community, and there's very little money around here. We have the effects of climate change right outside our door. We've had fires, we've had floods, we've had to evacuate. And I know that Fortis's plan is if we have certain conditions this summer, that our electricity and gas will be cut off. And that's a situation in a number of small communities in this area. And just think about, if your oxygen tank had to be cut off and you couldn't get gas to leave the community, like it's pretty clear. And people really care about this. I think if you ask, is it the very top of your concerns? It might not be, because a lot of people aren't really too sure how they're going to get food for the week, but people do care. So sometimes I feel a little sad because a lot of what comes out from the climate people is very academic language. And I say all the time, could you please use plain language? Because people want to know, people are concerned, but as soon as they see that language that they really can't read and plow through, they're turned off. So here's what I hear quite a bit now, and that is people who are involved in climate feeling that there's very little hope, that it's so extremely dire right now that there's no time to, there's just not time to take to bring all these people on board, to use simple language, to offer different actions. We have to just really take a view of let's electrify right away, let's talk to our politicians, and things that a lot of people aren't ready to do. So I wanted to hear some feedback from Angela and Patricia about that, please.
If you
What
don't
what
mind.
yeah, what kind of activities do, like when you say people in my community are concerned, so what kind of meeting ground would you have? Are you talking about you're having you meet in the library, you meet in the grocery store in passing, or you have a conversation group, a reading club? Like what's the context?
Uh, for myself, I try and bring that conversation up a lot. And I work in the local thrift store where we have many, many people come through. So, for
Hmm.
example, yesterday I handed out a really nice handout that we had made up about all the benefits of thrifting and how that's helpful for the climate. And people were really excited about that. So, that's one place that we meet. But in the scene, it would take a big push, for example, to have climate come up at the seniors center. It's not that they don't care, but I just think we're not ready for that. It's more individual conversations.
So I think that it's fairly easy to make the connection, like from we can save money by doing this, right?
Mhm.
So I think that that can be a conversation starter, and thrifting obviously is a really nice way to do that. I think that sometimes the recycling waste reduction conversations can be like a little bit of a exit ramp from a main climate conversation, right? But it is tactile, and some of that stuff is very much under people's control, right? So whether you put the plastic in the blue bin, or whether you go to the thrift store and you buy yourself you know, a shirt that's going to have a second life, that people can very much control, right? So that's nice, and then you're like away from that like oh my God space. um but I think that in terms of like how everything is connected, you can talk about, well, one of the cool things about thrifting is that we reduce the resource use and we use up less energy. And there's also obviously then connections with emissions. So you can have that conversation and connect it to pretty much anything, I think. And then I think as soon as people go into the oh yeah, but that's like so overwhelming, we can't really do anything, like you can loop it back saying like, oh, but like like having like staying away from fast fashion is doing something. So like there are local actions that we can do and you're doing it, which is kind of what Patricia was saying too, is like as a starting point to get to the you're doing it already. Like you have a bicycle, you have a shirt from the thrift store.
I'm just going to add very quickly, Sue. I refuse to buy pickles from India when I go to my local grocery store. The pickles are from India, dill pickles, and I'm thinking, what? We can't make dill pickles in Canada? And it's kind of funny because that all leads back to when I was growing up. My parents had a huge vegetable garden, and at the end of the season, they would harvest everything and prepare it and can it. And like that's another way, if you're not paying for food being delivered from halfway around the world and able to can it or preserve it yourself locally, you're going to save a lot of money. I'm going to quickly move to Anne because we're just about out of time, and there's still one
Can I
thing I
just interrupt just for a second on Sue's question? So I would ask you, Sue, why it's important to you to talk about climate. And if it's important to you because you feel worried and want to feel less alone, then there are lots of ways that you can talk with people in your community about the impacts of climate change, like wildfires, like floods, like taking care of each other. that might allow you to feel less alone. And at the same time, you're talking about climate. If you're talking about helping your neighbor with a flood, you are actually talking about climate. And also the cost of living. Jim Stanford at the Center for Future Work has done some research that shows that the oil and gas industry is responsible for 1/3 of the rise in the price of groceries over the past 5 years. And so the links are all there. And I can see from your perspective that it might be quite challenging to be always the person who's always bringing up climate, right? So I would just encourage you to take care of your own needs to be part of the community. And when you're taking care of your own needs to be part of that, they will move in to take care of you. And you will be talking about climate because climate changes everything.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes,
Sue.
I'm making okay.
I know we
Go
want to
ahead.
have a longer conversation, but we're just running out of time. And I'd like to get to Anne before we finish.
Well, I was just wondering if other people have to leave and maybe Sue or Patricia or uh, Angela had time afterward, I'd be willing to let Sue express what she had to say and maybe, if people didn't mind a little bit longer to deal with my question, that would be okay. But if that's not on, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes, no problem.
Okay, thank you. So for those people who might want to leave, because we did just book an hour, I want to mention that the idea of having a follow-up session has come up, and because you want to practice. And I have to tell you, one of the best courses I took as an adult was a role-playing exercise where half of the people were given an objective to achieve, and the other half of the people were basically supposed to resist what they were trying to do. It was incredible. It was so much fun. It was so much fun. And so I think a little role-playing exercise like that as a means of practicing, maybe I can ask you to raise your hand just on the screen. You don't have to raise the digit if you're interested in a follow-up session. Lori?
I
Sean?
am. I just can't find my hand.
Okay. Anne?
I am
Admiral?
interested. Yeah.
Okay. So at least half the people here are interested. So I'm going to call the session, but we're going to continue. So those of you who have to leave now, thank you very, very much for attending. And I hope you have great conversations out there. I will be sending a follow-up note with some resource material from this as well.
And will you have the CAFS balloons?
I'm sorry?
The CAFS balloons of actions, 10 actions?
Yes, yes.
Great.
Okay, so Sue, where did you go? There you are. Please go ahead.
Well, I do appreciate your feedback. I think what I'm saying is it's a little bit of a plea to people who are very involved in climate. For example, in my email today, I got some ideas from some climate people that they were going to be putting out. And when I ran it through a readability formula, it was between grade 13 and 15. And I see that quite a bit. So I guess my plea in a way is please don't leave out people who do care, but who are not academics. Use plain language, and you're going to bring in a lot of other people. And I know that there's that sense that we just don't have time. We have to like really just maybe cater to those academic people who can do something. Um, I I hope that's not true.
I know it's not true. Okay, Anne, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, yes. I need ideas. I am going to be hosting a table at a climate solutions hub in June. And it's for our organization, which is whose mandate is to advocate for an energy future for the province of New Brunswick that is fossil-free and is nuclear power-free. Well, can you imagine a bigger turnoff? But anyway, I need to, at my table, the Seniors for Climate mission is to break the climate silence and get people talking. So how do I get people talking? What can I do to stimulate conversation? Because I just don't want to stand there and hand them a handout or talk at them. I want to get them talking. And so I'm just wondering how I can do that, given the fact that we're supposed to be an organization that is advocating for transitioning to a renewable energy-based electricity system. So help.
Go ahead, Angela.
Okay. Is it indoors or outdoors?
It'll be under a big tent. So it won't be good acoustics.
So it's sort of outdoors, but or is the tent enclosed?
No, it will be, the tent is basically a roof, and it will be outdoors, but under a tent, so that if it rains, we can still go ahead.
Okay. All right. So anyway, I will tell you one outdoor solution and one indoor or outdoor solution to engage with people. So one thing that we've done at the Carp Fair, which is this like, oh my God, like 3.5 day long fair where we've been trying to do outreach to also like our more rural population. So what I have is a setup like you can buy yourself like a portable solar panel together with a battery. And if you have a small amount of budget. And then what you do is you power a popcorn maker. And you can buy these like mini popcorn makers that are like low wattage. So when it starts up, like it doesn't spike too much in terms of electricity need. So you hook that up to your battery and then you start making popcorn for people, and people can smell the popcorn. People will come to you for popcorn. So that kind of works. And make the salt optional, I guess. So the nice thing is that you can be demonstrating your renewable energy technology in a way which is physically quite engaging for people. And then you can start conversations about, well, like if you store the energy that our solar panel got, then I can have it in this battery and then I can make your popcorn when I need to make your popcorn. So anyway, so that's one trick. Another trick is on, again, the Happy Internet, you can order these like Wheel of Fortune-y things, right? And they're like sort of from my chest to my head. They're about that size. They're colorful. And the kids, especially, like when they see them, they're like drawn like magnets to this Wheel of Fortune. And then you can put like quiz questions on your Wheel of Fortune, which can have to do with renewable energy or vaguely so. And then you can have prizes. So you can have unhealthy sugar prizes, you can have apples, you can have whatever. And then you will have a continuous flow of people coming to your table wanting to spin your Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah, that might work just because we will be under a tent. So the solar panel, the light won't get to the solar panel. And if it rains, that would be a problem. But, if I were in a location where I could stick the solar panel outside the tent and it could get sun, that would work. But I don't have any guarantee of that ability. So I think I really do need something that can be done under a roof. So the
Go ahead,
Wheel
Laura.
of Fortune thing could be done under a roof.
So, Anne, in the chat, I just put a photo of our spinning wheel that we use in Penticton and also a little bit of information about what we do. And you can actually make one with a bike wheel. Like you go to a bike store and get a used bike wheel, and
Oh,
somebody could make one for much less than we paid for ours. And then you can just use paper fillers and write on it some questions, and then you can, or some topics, and then there can be questions, especially directed to your issue in your community, and have people talk. And exactly what Angela said, the kids love to spin, and then you get to talk to the parents.
right. Okay. Now I will check the chat and see if I can see it. I can't see very well, so
Okay, and
always an
I'll
issue.
be sending it out in a
Oh,
note shortly.
oh, good. So you'll be
Okay.
sending out the chat with the links?
Yes, I will.
Oh, fantastic. That takes the pressure off. Try to find it. But that's great. I mean, a bicycle wheel and make your own. And I was thinking the questions could be, as opposed to, you know, instead of like leading questions, like what sort of energy would you like to see in New Brunswick? How would you like your electricity to be generated? What do you think is the most sustainable energy for your children and grandchildren, so that I'm not, I get what I get. In other words, if somebody thinks gas plants are the bee's knees, I get what I get. But, it might be quite revealing to see what people really say.
Well, if you want to get better results, you can phrase the question a little bit differently. And you can say, would you rather that New Brunswick's um, energy future be clean powered or dirty fossil fuel powered? See
Okay,
what you get.
okay. I'm going to write that down as a model.
And the nuclear stuff it's a divisive issue because there's lots of people who are green who think small scale nuclear projects are fine. So I'd be in your shoes, I'd kind of be wanting to duck it. I'd kind of be wanting to go, let's do solar, wind, geothermal, um, hydro, whatever it is you're going, and versus gas and oil. And because there's no private folks coming forward with money for nuclear, it's all government subsidized. So if we can just leave them out of the conversation, we're often better off because then the government has to belly up the money and most governments don't have the money to do that. So the way that there was just a national survey done by Clean Energy Canada, I think, and they got the results that I'm just talking about were like so many more Canadians would rather that we were building ourselves as a clean energy superpower rather than a dirty fossil fuel superpower, right? So, and you don't even have to use the word dirty if it's too loaded, but you could say polluting. There's kind of no disagreement about that. So if you're careful about how the questions are phrased, you can engage people. I mean, pollsters are always telling us that climate isn't a concern anymore, but you have to ask how the questions are phrased. And so it's not a new thing for people to be worried about how you ask the question. I would encourage you to put a great deal of thought into that.
Okay. Would you perhaps, and Angela too, be available if I could run the questions by you, so, I don't get into any unnecessary minefield?
Oh, I'd be happy to. But there's another way you could go about doing it too, which I think will resonate with Angela's history and human rights, and that is you can engage people in a broader conversation with an opening statement like, no matter who you are or where you live, the size of your wallet or the color of your skin, I believe people in New Brunswick should have, and then you can open it up and see what they come up with. And people are going to say a decent living, a roof over their heads, or you can even put that in a checklist and have a checklist of 20 things and ask them to pick as many as they want, right? If you design the checklist well, you're going to get a checklist that drives us towards solar, wind, and geothermal. You just are, because the oil industry is driving us away from all that. So that's another technique so it's kind of this all-inclusive back to Sue's point. No matter who you are, no matter where you live, no matter the size of your wallet, people in this community all want, right? And then you just have a list and see whether people think that everybody wants these things. And they're all going to say yes if you phrase the question right.
Okay. And is that enough, or can you have a follow-up, for instance? Let's say that people say, all people in this community want, and somebody picks, let's say, more wind power, more wind farms.
Well, I wouldn't make it that specific. I would
Oh.
say clean energy.
But
I would
clean
say,
energy, that could include nuclear power.
well, or you might want to say clean, free, or cheap energy, because nuclear power is not cheap.
No.
So, I mean, Bill McKibben just did a wonderful seminar where he's such a good communicator, and he's now giving us the this or that. In good communication, you always have, if not this, then that. So people have a clear choice. And he's giving us energy from heaven versus energy from hell. So obvious. It's just so great. So that might be too political for New Brunswick, but it is kind of the truth, right? Like lots of people have said that the tar sands looks like Mordor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's just so good, right? So, and then the other thing I would really recommend, Anne, is that you have a place where people can go so that they can feel like they can, even if they don't join, they can see how they can be part of a community. Because Bill McKibben's advice when he's asked, what can I as an individual do? His response is always stop being so much of an individual. Go join a group.
Mhm.
And so if you can have a list of groups that people can go join, or YouTube channels they can subscribe to, or, like Simon Clark's YouTube channel has, I don't know, 800,000 subscribers. He's one of the main reasons why the UK has such good climate policy. Go watch some Simon Clark in your free time, right? So, just things that people can do, even if they end up doing it as an individual, they can feel like they're part of something bigger, right? So that I think that's really important. And people won't necessarily join things, but if you give them a handout they can leave with, then the next time they're bored with watching their 58th crime story or something, they might just see that piece of paper and say, oh, I'm going to go look at this guy, right? So. Bill Nye, the science guy. I don't know. They're kids, whatever. So,
great. Well,
or Catherine Hayhoe's YouTube channel. I mean, she's a bit in your face for a lot of newbies. So, and she's not a man. These things matter. And on that issue, one of the places I've had a lot of uptake from men. I mean, this is a bit kind of politically charged, and you might not agree with me. But I think there's a male instinct to protect and provide. Women have it too, probably, but that's something that men in my generation kind of resonate with. And so when their kids or their partners or their friends have trouble breathing, as we do in BC from wildfire smoke, they want to do something. And what they can do is they can make a homemade air filter really cheaply, and really they're better than the commercial ones. And there are patterns for making them on the Simon Fraser University website. I'd have to hunt around for it for a while, but you can probably find it. Air filter kits, you can look on YouTube. And for those of you who are running market fairs this summer, they don't take very long to build, and kids can decorate them. And they're better than the commercial ones and so much cheaper. And if you can get the guys helping to make them, then you've got a little community project happening right here that they can take home and protect their family. There you go.
So
Thanks,
Well,
you,
you
Laurie.
didn't make that one, right? That's a commercial one, right?
would I do that at the table, or is this an idea for a different,
Well, I don't know how much time you have, but if you had a resource, if you had somebody, it would be great if it was a man, somebody like Dave, who's willing to sit there and help people make homemade air filters. I think it would be a huge hit.
This took 15 minutes.
You made
just
that, Laurie?
Yes, yeah, it's with the BC Lung Association.
There you
They
go. That's
all
it.
around the province. There are instructions which I'm happy to share with Dave. They are amazing, and it's just you just have to have the box fan, one filter, and duct tape. That's it, and it takes 10 minutes. They are so great. So I'm happy to share the instructions with everybody
And how
because
much did the box fan cost?
well, in BC, with BC Lung Association in the communities, they're doing it for free. So in
Right,
Penticton, they just bring it to us and we get to sign up
right.
and we get a lecture about wildfire smoke. And then they give us all the supplies and show
Right.
us how to make them. But if you were to make it, it would probably be $75 for the fan and the really good filter and just the duct tape. So that's all it is.
So I have an
Uh,
idea for your kids, Laurie.
yeah.
Get BC Lung Association to give you 40 fans and get them all making portable air filters. They'll have had a conversation about climate. They will. And they can paint them and decorate them.
And give them away to people who need them.
Yeah, and if they don't want them, you can give them away. It's it's very hard to stay safe if you're not well housed.
Yep.
well, great. Well, thank you. That is terrific. And I really do appreciate the fact that you'd be willing to give feedback if I go the questions route, you know.
I
So-
think you're going to have a lot more luck attracting men into your tent if there's something for them to do.
Well,
Wow.
if I had, like it's $75, if I had one demonstration piece there, maybe somebody could, I wouldn't have enough budget certainly to have a whole bunch of fans unless I could
No,
get
but
like
if the BC Lung Association is doing it, maybe the New Brunswick Lung Association is doing it, or it's just about to think about doing it, and your request might tip them over the edge, right? Like,
Yeah, well, I will ask the MB Lung Association.
tell them to go talk to the BC Lung Association. Give them a
Okay,
nudge.
great. I might be able to help out the MB Lung Association because they're gonna have a table too, and they just might decide to do that.
There you go. Have them 2 tables side by side so that people associate climate with health.
Ah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad. Like this build your own box fan project, I think is like a real winner because like that idea of having tactile stuff. And we're organizing what is it going to be called? We used to think sustainability fair. I think we're going to call it Eco Fair Ottawa. In June, and maybe we can make that one of the workshops
Right.
that like you could get a whole family like working together, right? On this
Absolutely.
this thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to add like one again piece of like free advice for you, Anne, in terms of how to set up your table. I think
right.
that in terms of the questions, like we found that we kind of started with sort of more complex questions, and we ended up like shifting to more simple questions that you can communicate in, in a noisy, busy environment.
Right.
And the idea is that people would know some of the answers, right? And then you can basically be happy and celebrate and get like a positive ball rolling. But the important thing really is then to think about like ladder of engagement. So now you are talking to a couple of people who've spun your wheel, whatever, and then the kid gets the prize, and then what? Like you get them to sign a petition. You say, "Oh, do you want more information?" You have a flyer, you give the flyer. Ideally, I think we do want to get people's contact information. So it's like, "Oh, does this interest you? Can I send you like when there's more events or like some not too threatening hook?" And you try to get the contact information so that you can build a set of people that you're communicating with. And sometimes, like, especially with like the younger folks, they're kind of like, I don't want to ask anybody for their email. And I'm kind of like, well, come on, if you're going to be a community organizer, like you got to ask people for their email, please. You can maybe not ask them for their phone number. That's okay with me. And just make sure that they write the email in a legible fashion because some people like they want to please you and they do write the thing down, but then they don't actually want to be contacted, so then they just make it illegible. So that is like another happy engagement point where you're kind of like, oh, I can't read that. Can you write more clearly? So anyway, that I think paying attention that you have that second step is really important to make the time at the table worthwhile.
Great. Thank you very much. So helpful. I feel a lot better. I've been in a panic about this thing and it's 6 weeks away and I'm already freaking, so I feel a lot better.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So I think we're going to wrap up now. As I said, I'll be sending something out. I'll be putting the recording up on our YouTube channel, and I'll be sending out a list of resources. So Angela and Patricia, if you have anything you'd like to include on that list, please send me a note. And I also want to thank both of you for coming and getting us really involved in climate conversations tonight. I think it's been great. And there's more I want to talk about. And so that's why I'm kind of looking forward to the follow-up session where we try to do some role playing maybe.
Wonderful.
Thank you for the invitation. It was lovely. And I hope we've started a movement for homemade
I hope
air
so too.
filters.
Homemade air filters. Yay. Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone
Take
have a good
care.
night.
Yes, thank you, Angela. Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, everyone. This was wonderful.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Dave.